Hello everyone, it's Rabea, hope you're all good. Thank you for joining me in this live stream to go through my brand new Archetype plugin with Neural DSP. Properly cool. But yeah, let me just explain how the live stream is going to go. Basically, I'm going to deep dive into the plugin, explain it all, go through all the different elements of it, give you some tones, run through with different guitars, basically like I would normally do for a video demo, but live. So if you've got any questions as I'm going through, feel free to chuck them in the chat. I've got Dan here, my good friend Dan, obviously from Neural as well.
Hi off camera.
Hi off camera. And he will be curating those questions that we can discuss at the end. So if you've got anything really pressing you want to ask, feel free to do that, and I'll get to him at the end of the stream, whenever that happens to be. I'll also apologise for the sweat. It's absolutely sweltering up here. It's ridiculously warm in my attic. I have no AC. But anyway. Let's start. So yeah, basically I have a new plugin with Neural DSP. So the first thing I want to do is say a huge, massive, bottom of my heart thank you to Neural DSP, to Doug, especially to Pancho for working together on this plugin for since January maybe. It's been a long time. Of course, Dan, who basically arranged and directed the whole music video for this as well.
You can crank the mic gain a little bit.
Crank the mic gain. How about I just come in closer?
There you go.
I'll move in closer. Yeah. As I was saying, just thank you to Neural DSP for this opportunity to do a plugin. It's amazing. So obviously been using the plugins for a long time. Huge fan. So to get to this point is really cool. So anyway, my Archetype. I will give you a little bit of an overview before diving into the tones and stuff like that. I've got a screen grab so we can actually go in detail with it. But in a nutshell, my Archetype is the main priority for me is that it's a space to be creative. It's a place for creativity, for me to write tunes, kind of get whatever kind of tones and sounds and vibes I've got in my head that I want to get out, that basically are a collection of the sounds that I've used over the years with different bands here on my YouTube channel with all this gear around me, like over the years of doing like demos on YouTube. It's all kind of distilled into this plugin, I would say, but it definitely is aimed more at the sort of creative side of what I've done over the last few years. So it references heavily on the bands I've played in, like Tosca, the stuff with the Totemist, so and then also the kind of things I like to do with lower gain sounds and strats and things like that. So that's the kind of approach there. I think also the other approach for me that was really important was that it just captured the vibe of like the amps, like real ampy vibes, if that makes sense, because I spend so much time in this room with amps around me that was really important. I plug these amps into my load boxes and I play at home, and that's how I've done it for years. And so to get the plugin to feel that way was really important. So the amps that we've modeled and the amps that we based the plugin on, I think we've done a really good job of capturing that vibe. So that was the other thing, is just that it had all of the tones that I like to do. So that's the basic overview. So let me give you a little bit of we'll go into a screen grab and I'll show you my way through the plugin and explain as we go. So that will probably be easier. So we should have a screen grab coming up now. I can't see there we go. Yeah, we're good. So yeah, as you can see, we've got Logic up on screen now. You can see the plugin as you would load it up. So the first amp that gets loaded up is the Crunch amp. And this is, as I've said, or you've seen on the website, it's kind of like it can achieve kind of a bit of everything. This amp was based heavily on the little lunchbox amps that I carry around with me all the time, that I've used for Tosca for years and stuff like that. That's basically what we used and kind of based the whole design on, and the sound of the plugin on, those Kraken amps that I use. Which is why you can see things like the EL346L6 switch, because you can change the tubes out in the real thing. But the idea was to base the amps there and then sort of elaborate and things that would be kind of cool to do. So as you can see on the close-up there on the Crunch amp, you've got a mid boost and a high-end boost. I'm actually going to open the window because it's so warm. And I'm not playing, so let's do a bit of that. So yeah, the Crunch amp and the high gain amp are basically from the same amplifier, just different channels, because that's how I used them live. I would use 2 of them in stereo, one on one channel, one on the other, and then use a pedal board in true stereo, and that's how I got any of the tones from kind of mid gain to high gain. So that's kind of what it is. They're kind of based on that, and then the clean amp is very much based on a kind of like a Fender Twin kind of thing, but again we adapted it. We added things like that mid boost and the bright switch that you can see there. And again with the high gain amp, it's the high gain channel, but we adapted it so you've got a presence control and the tight knob, the tight knob is massively useful, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Just to give you an idea of the tonal foundation, as it were, and I was really particular about these because obviously being involved in the design of both the plugin and the sort of source, the inspiration for the sound of the plugin from start to finish, it was really important that it felt the same, which, you know, we did a lot of testing and it does, so that's great. Show that again.
Just crank your mic gain a little bit.
Okay. I'm gonna try. If I crank it too much, it'll feedback. I can just sit in closer.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. So yeah, that's the basic inspiration behind the amplifiers. It's also worth saying that all of the amps and the pedals and everything in this plugin are brand new algorithms. Like the amps we've never used these amps. The pedals are all brand new algorithms. The delay and the reverb are, and of course the synth. We'll get onto the synth. But yeah, so let me take you on to the pedals now, because I think it's really important to just give you an idea of, in case you didn't know what these pedals can do. So obviously you've got a compressor, you've got an octave, you've got a fuzz, which is new for Neural, because obviously you've got a couple of fuzzes in the quad cortex, but we don't have any fuzzes in the archetypes, and I love fuzz, so that was really important that we got good fuzz. And then overdrive. But something really important that I think maybe got overlooked is that this vintage modern switch that you see on the overdrive, the fuzz and the octaver actually load up completely new pedals. So like the fuzz, for example, in modern mode is a completely different fuzz pedal from the one that you when you switch to vintage, it loads up a completely different fuzz. So to give you an idea of what, you know, in vintage mode, it very much references a fuzz bender style fuzz. And then in modern mode, it's heavily inspired by my favorite little stomp box. It's the Thunderclaw kind of style fuzz. So that's what you get in there. So it loads up a completely different pedal, which is really cool. So it's actually 2 in 1. Same for the overdrive. So Tube Screamer in modern, more like a kind of RC kind of boostery vibe, but we modded the gain structure a little bit on that. For vintage, for the octaver, it's like an octave, so you got octave up and octave down, but what's really cool here is we added an Octavio. I actually don't know if that's the true device name for it, but either way, in vintage mode it loads up like an Octavio, but what's great about it is that I don't actually think in real life there is like an Octavio pedal that you can add a low and a high octave to, or at least I've never heard of one, so that's really cool. It's a whole new sound, which is really fun. Obviously the twin blade compressor is a dual compressor, so it's kind of like feeding one into the other, heavily inspired again by it's like the Cali stacked compressor that I like to use. So obviously these are all pedals that I've used over the years and stumbled across and gone, oh, I love that pedal, I'm going to use that, and that's what we basically put in here. Another cool thing with the overdrive in modern mode is that we added a bass control, so like a normal Tube Screamer doesn't have bass control, so it's really good for carving out the flub. So that would be the pedals. Cabs wise, it gets an oversized V30 loaded cab. We shot all these IRs. Well, actually, it's Matthias and Elmo who work with Neural that shot all the IRs in Finland. So Nolly actually sent the V30 speakers out to be loaded into an oversized Mesa cab for us to shoot the high gain cab. So that's really cool. Those are actually Nolly's personal V30s that we used in the plugin, which is sick. So you only get one cab in the high gain, because I thought you just want a great V30 sounding cab. You don't really need anything else. In the crunch, it's a green back loaded cab and a black back loaded cab that me and Pancho, we picked them out personally, because the thing with this is these plugins is you can unlink the heads and the cabs. So it was nice to have such a different sounding cab for the crunch. way more mid-forward, mid-present for crunchy vibes. And then the clean it's like an open back 2x12 style cab that we shot in there. And the rooms, what you're hearing whenever you switch between those amps, it's actually that cab in the room rather than a general room IR that you might hear. So that's really cool. And that room IR was shot in, what's the name of the studio? Finbox Studios, where a bunch of wicked bands have recorded their albums there. So that's really cool. So yeah, that'll be the cabs. I decided to choose the EQ very similar to the John Petrucci Archetype, where it's the same style EQ, because I actually really enjoyed using that in the JP Archetype. Just being able to pinpoint the frequency that you want and then dial in the amount of gain. I thought that was really cool, as opposed to the 9-band. And then the time-based effects, you've got a delay and a reverb. And for me, I wanted analog delay. I thought that was a really cool sound. I like analog delay, use it all the time over like a digital sounding delay. So that's really nice. But one thing that I wanted to add to this delay, which you may have overlooked or not, I'm not sure, is the pre and the post switch. So for all the more traditional guys that like to run delay in front of the amp, or you do the shoegaze effect where it's that cascading delay into the front of the amp, you can switch that on the delay pedal. So that's sick. So if you're running like a Strat into the clean amplifier, put the delay in front, crank up the room mics. I'll do that in a bit, and you get that kind of vibey Strat tone. So that's sick. I really, really enjoy that. Again, it's a dual delay. You've got the icicles, which is kind of referencing a preset that I made for the Quad Cortex, which is actually called Icicles, but that's inspired by a preset that I made off my actual stereo rig pedal board, where I dialed in a bunch of different stuff on my Strymons, and it created like a cascading like shimmer delay effect. So that's basically what that is. And then the Aeon's reverb it's a brand new algorithm. Like I said, all of the stuff in the plugin is brand new, but the reverb is more or less kind of like a modified plate reverb in terms of the way it sounds. But we added the freeze function, which is awesome, because you can just get a drone going and jam over it. You can change the pitch of it with an expression pedal. You could map that, or you can do that when you're writing in Logic. You can automate the change in pitch. So it's a really nice sounding delay. Can be nice and reverb. It can be a nice short decay or like infinite. It's up to you. So that would be all the devices in the plugin. It's also worth saying, before we move on to the synth, that at this point in Neural's progression as a company, and where I'd got my opportunity to make this plugin, I had to look back at all the other products and go, there's so much ground already covered. It would be silly to just make another high gain like Archetype or something. Like I there was so much stuff already taken care of that it's like, okay, how do I make it different? And what's cool is that, like I say, I like to use fuzzes and I like to use synth a lot in my songs. You don't always hear it, but it's always there. And the kind of amps that I like to use aren't the most forgiving playing amps, like if you've ever played any of the Krakens or anything like that, it's not the most forgiving amp to play. Like it's quite exposing. So the fact that that's how it feels in the plugin is, for me, a real achievement, and I'm really, really happy with the result, because they are sometimes a little bit unforgiving. So that's great. So yeah, it was like a case of what can we do new, and that was exactly it. Getting things like the freeze function in there, the pre and the post switch on the delay, the fuzzes, of course the synth, but the style of amps and the tones that I tried to achieve was everything from vintage, stratty, old school stuff, all the way through to the kind of modern high gain stuff I like to do. It is also worth saying that I wouldn't necessarily consider myself like a djenty, modern, tight, chugging metal player. I like that music and I try to write it, but it's very much not my first thing. And so I would say that anyone that's expecting like the djenty, tight, chuggy, like full-on stuff, this might not necessarily be the plugin for you if you're looking for like that stuff. Like you might want to check out like the Gajira or the Nameless or some of the other plugins. But if you want like tone tweakers galore and inspiration and creativity, then I would say this is, well, that's what I tried to do with the plugin. So anyway, let's finally move on to the synth. There's a lot to cover before we get into tones, but I just think it's worth doing. The synth is obviously, could be a little bit intimidating to some of you guys. First thing I'll say is it genuinely takes your guitar signal and then triggers ADSR, which turns into oscillators and it's real synthesis. It's not an effect. The original inspiration for the synth element of the plugin, I used the Keeley Synth 1 pedal live, or I had done with the expression pedal plugged in for those cool synthy sweeps. I've done videos on it in the past and I used it in Tosca a lot, and it's like a pedal I really enjoy. So the original idea was, on my original brief that was sent to Neural, was like, could we do a synth pedal kind of thing, like that does this? Sent the pedal out there, and it was very much a pedal that messes with the guitar signal and sort of creates a synthy sound. But the cool thing was that Pancho, when I asked him originally, he was like, oh, you mean like a synth? Because he loves using synths. And it was almost like a slight miscommunication, but in the best way possible, because he assumed I meant like an actual synth that's triggered by the guitar. And so that was the journey that we started at that point, was like he'd set his team upon trying to come up with that. And the result is insane, because it is actually like, I have a subsequent 37 back there that I used all the time on the Tosca stuff, and I use it in all my songs. And to be able to achieve very much a similar kind of vibe with actual bass synth through my guitar and be able to play it like that was cool, because it means I can write a riff. I always like to double up my riffs with synth, so I can do that. I can write a riff, record it, double that up with the synth sound, and I'm done. Because I'm terrible at keys. Like, I'm really bad at like playing keyboards, so that was a nice thing to do. Anyway, the synthesizer is not that complicated. Just to give you a quick overview, the main thing to bear in mind is the input sensitivity, because that is very much how glitchy it's going to sound, how much it's going to pop, how much it's going to make weird noises. If you're using a Strat or low output pickups, you want to boost the input sensitivity. If you're using something really high output, you might want to lower that, just to get rid of some of those pops and squeaks and stuff like that. It's a really, really important control. Envelope retrigger is the difference between it starting at a new note, like in the world of synth. So like if I was to pick, it triggers that envelope and starts it again. If you turn that off, it doesn't. It'll kind of let you play more legato lines and stuff without necessarily re-triggering that note. It's the same as if you were to go like that every time you're triggering the synth. Whereas when you turn that off, you can play legato and not run the risk of it sort of re-triggering. So that's cool. Of course, it's got tuning, which is good. Pre and the post, which was really important for me, because on the Tosca album, we ran the subsequent 37 through all my amps and captured it that way. So when it came to designing the synth, I was like, can we please make sure that I can run it through the front of my amps just like I did in the studio? And that was totally possible. So you can manipulate it. You can use it standalone as a synth, or you can send it back through all the amps and pedals, which I think is so cool, because it just opens up so many more cool sounds. Then you've got a gate, which is really important to set, because it affects the signal coming in, so it can also help for avoiding pops and stuff like that. It's a balancing act between your input sensitivity and your gate. And then of course you got your output. It's also worth saying that mix means you can blend in the sound of the synth with your guitar pre or post, so that's cool. But then the actual synth itself isn't that complicated. You've got 4 different areas. They're all color coordinated. The first port of call for me would be your amplifier section. So you can have the difference between a slow attack or fast decay. You can change your sustain. Then you move on to your oscillators. Again, I'll go through all this with actual tones, but you can change the waveform, you can change the pitch of the oscillator, the level of it, and you can detune them individually. Unisons is basically where it sort of doubles up those oscillators, like it sort of duplicates it almost in a sense. So it gives you more width, which is why you've got a width control underneath that. So with it just being one unison, you're just going to get the basic sort of sound, and as you add more unisons, it's sort of a very good way of if you know what the Tim Henson multi-voicer looks like, how it has like the main note and then either side you see the harmonies that it has. Imagine they're unisons, so as you add them, it like widens out the sound overall. So when you add the detune in there, it gets super like wide with loads of width. Again, the wave shapes along the top just change the sound of the synth, basically change the sound of the oscillators between something really heavy and like angry or something soft. General wave shape, the very basic, like you've got sine wave, triangle, like ramp, and then square, but they do the job, they sound great. Move to filter, your standard sort of filter cut-off knob that you would find on any synth. Resonance, and then the kind of the I guess you call that the how do you say that word, like how steep it is? the roll off of the high end. And then you've got your envelope amount, the decay, and the drive, which is really cool. Something we added really late to the synth, but it's like drive into the synth, so you can hit the front of the amps harder with a bit of drive, which is really cool. Finally, the Arpeggiator. The Arpeggiator is really cool. It was something that I believe was very difficult for the team to code and do, but they did it, and it works really, really well. But I think it was a lot of work. In fact, this whole synth was a lot of work for them, so it's absolutely amazing that they did it. The Arpeggiator was the last thing we changed. In fact, we changed it the morning of we shot the video for this plugin. It had a very different functionality that we decided to change like right at the last minute, which was cool, and we were able to do it. But basically, you've got control over the root, so depending on what key you're playing in, you set that, because it really helps with the major and the minor arpeggios. It like locks into the scale, so you can do chord scales and all the rest of it. The mode between major and minor, and then the arpeggiator pattern, whether it's up, down, up, random, whatever, like you would find on most synths. And then it's also worth saying with root, if you turn it off, it's almost like a chromatic mode, so it will just play the same arpeggio chromatically wherever you move around the fretboard. It doesn't lock to any chord scale, which is really useful. And then, yeah, you've got how many octaves it plays the arpeggio through, and then the notes. So this is the cool bit, because you can select 1 to 8 notes in the arpeggio and basically design your own, and it's really, really fun. Sync to time, and then the rate, of course. And that sounds like a lot, but once I get going to the tones, it's really quite easy to dial in something cool. So that would basically cover the whole plugin. There's a lot in there. Like I said, the pedals, you get 2 for 1 in most of the pedals. The amps, they're all brand new amps for the sort of, I guess, Neural's amp range of amps they use. The synth is completely brand new. Everything is new. So there's nothing that they've done before. There's no sort of crossover there with any of the older plugins, other than things like transpose, which is sick. They had that on the John Petrucci plugin. I was like, that needs to go in, because it's well easier than having to tune different guitars. And of course the doubler, because you can't really make a stereo plugin. Like I use Stereo Rigs Live, so the closest thing is to do like a doubler, so it gives you that kind of vibe. So that was nice. Anyway, let's get into some tones. I figured the best thing I'd do is load up the default preset that is the same one for you guys whenever you download a trial or buy the plugin, which, by the way, if you've done either of those things, genuinely massive thank you for checking it out. It's really cool that you decided to do that. So, you should be able to see we've got the default preset there, and I'm plugged into just the Relic, the Chapman, so let me just give you what it sounds like. So what's basically going on there is we're in EL34 mode, and it's kind of, that is exactly how I would set that if I was in the rehearsal room with the band, the new band. So I'd run it like that if I was using a humbucker guitar or a Strat, and basically then add pedals to that and so on and so forth. So that's why that's there and set like that. Again, I decided not to add those switches in as you load it up, because I figured it was player's choice if you want to add those or not. But I'll just demonstrate how the amp itself works before we move on to any other elements. So let me turn off the time-based effects, and then we'll just hear it. So by adding those switches, it definitely gives you a little bit more touch response without changing any of the settings on the amp. Again, if you're using like a baritone or something lower or like darker sounding pickups, super handy to have that there. That was the general gist of putting those switches in the crunch and the clean, because I figured for the kind of glassier, like lower gain stuff that I like to do with lots of reverb and delay, sometimes you want to add that level of definition without having to change your settings on your amp. So that was why I put the switches there. So that's cool. And again, the one thing that's really important to point out with this amp is that it's like the jack of all trades in terms of what it does, because you can do the edge of breakup and then you can just send it into filth, high gain. And again, if you want to use the high gain cab to get even a more tighter high gain sound, you can do that. Throw a tube screamer in front. It's a great channel. It's a great sounding channel. So let me show you. So yeah, so that channel for me, always love using that one because you can just go from like a push clean thing all the way through to just intense high gain. It's a different. It's not really tight, but it's great for fat chords and big moments in songs and stuff like I like to do. So that's fun. That's cool. I guess that's a good overview of that amplifier. Maybe I'll just show you really quickly the difference between the EL34 and the 6L6. Because I really like the EL34 on this particular amp because, sort of, as I say, the original amp it was based on, that channel was supposed to be the kind of British, you know, barkier sort of channel. So it's nice to have that there, and I really like it for that. But let me show you the difference in the tube tone. So. On that channel, I find it's super noticeable in the mid-range. It gets way more aggressive in the EL34 mode. But what's one thing to point out again with those kind of amps is like 6L6, it breaks up faster, so better for the higher gain stuff. Like if you were to gain that up and want to play tighter, I'd chuck the 6L6 mode in. Whereas when you do the lower sort of push clean thing, use the EL34 mode. That's what I would do. So that's cool. Anyway, that would be the crunch amp. I think before we go high gain, let's go clean. And again, I'll just click the default setting so it's back to default. And move over to the clean. And I set this up because I would normally use this, well, I set this up when I was running humbuckers, so that's why the switches are in. If I'm running like a Strat, I might take those out, but again, the cool thing with this amp is it's mega simple. It's meant to be used more with the pedals, because it's like, you know, as I say, its inspiration was a Fender Twin, and most of the time we use those for pedal boards, all that kind of stuff in front. So super simple layout, and the EQ is mega powerful. the treble is intense, so dial that in with caution. Whereas the bass, the other thing I wanted to achieve with this plugin was low end, you know, not tons, but like one thing I love about the Tone King plugin and about the sound that I use live is I like a lot of low end. I like it to sound very big and colossal. And I know that guitars, you know, in a mix don't necessarily need that character, but you can always carve it out when you're mixing. For me, when I'm sat playing and writing, I want to feel that. So that's why, you know, there's a nice, you know, supported low end to this plugin. Again, with this amplifier, the clean channel, I wanted it to achieve a warmth and a body similar to the Tone King plugin, for example. Just like I wanted the amps and that ampy vibe and that realistic amp feel, referencing like how the Nolly plugin works. Similar thing. The Nolly plugin is very raw, very just amp tone. And that's something I wanted to achieve with this too. Anyway, clean amp. What I like to do normally with a sound like this, again, I didn't put this on the default preset because I figured you don't want pedals on, you can choose whether to put those on, but I would add the compressor, a little bit of drive. So I do this. I hadn't muted the mic that time, sorry. But yeah, that's really good for, again, that deep, rich, warm, clean. But also, that's with humbuckers. You know, when you throw a Strat on that, you can get some really cool sounds. Which we'll get more into that later, because for me, the secret sauce in the plugin is being able to get the dirty blues tones with fuzz and stuff like that with a Strat with this amp. So we'll come back to that. So the high gain amp. The high gain amp, again, as I said, sort of based on and heavily inspired by my Lunchbox Krakens, specifically the Lunchbox ones, because I have a certain tone that I really loved for things like Tosca and the Toto Mist and stuff like that. So it's very much, again, with those amps, they are quite unforgiving. So it's super aggressive in the mid-range, kind of inspired, like the original design's kind of inspired by 5150, so it's not a million miles away, but yeah, it's an angry sounding amplifier. Let me just mute that. So unbelievably warm. So yeah, and I dialed in like a fat kind of halfway between a lead tone and a rhythm tone with the default preset. So what I'll do now is I'll just reset all settings, go back to the high gain amp. I like to use a 57 and a ribbon, so that's what I'm going to do. And yeah, so this is just the dry amp with everything at 12 o'clock. Very much just reminds me of that amp. That's just, this is the feel I expect to feel. So, couple of cool things. It has a presence knob. So yeah, basically the presence knob. What's nice about when we're working with these kind of plugins is when you start kind of trying to add stuff and like evolve something. Getting to choose like the area that the presence affects and things like that, like the frequency area that the presence knob actually affects, is such an interesting thing to do, because you sat there and you're dialing in, and you've got, like, as you can see at the minute, you've got the amp up on screen. And you have like these little like frequency, there's a little knob for the frequency and a little knob for the Q factor that help me dial in where the presence knob is. And that's so cool to be able to be that fine about it. I really enjoyed that process. Anyway, it's also worth saying there's like a making of this plugin at some point coming out that I've sort of tried to shoot as much of the development of it as possible. So it's kind of being edited up and hopefully it'll come out well. We'll see. The next most important thing about this amp that I genuinely love is the tight knob, because this is really makes this amp unique compared to the other amps in the range of Neural DSP, because having the tight knob at 12 o'clock is how the amp's naturally sat. One thing that's cool about this tight knob is, imagine like a high pass filter, like a shelf, a low end shelf even, that moves. And it changes the kind of response, where it's placed in the kind of circuit of the amp. By moving it up and down, by turning that knob up and down, it's actually affecting the overall sag and response of the amplifier. It's like, I'm not sure where it's placed, it's like in the preamp. Again, I'm no engineer, so I couldn't tell you exactly. But what it does do is it fully affects the overall response of the amp. So, I'm going to show you how you can go from like a tight, modern sounding overdrive, and as you dial it back, it goes into that sludgy, messery kind of soldano-y, like even further kind of dirty, because you can get doomy tones out of it that way. By adding fuzz on top of that, it gives you like that doom, disgusting, horrible sound. So check it out. Like you can hear the pick attack changes. It goes less from being a kind of clanky, tight chug to this flubby thing, which it's great for lead because it's way more silky, but it's really good for styles of music that aren't necessarily that modern progressive metal tone. And it's so much fun because not only do you have that, then you can really start to mold the sound of that amp around the fact that you've changed the response, if that makes sense. So it gets super flubby and low endy, so you've got the depth control to counteract that. You've got presence to add a little bit more definition. And on top of that, with the overdrive, you can pull out the bass to tighten it up. So let me demonstrate all of that for you now. So what that demonstrates is how you can change the response of the feel of the amp, so it's way more flubby in the attack, but by pulling all the bass out with the Paragon, it gets that tighter sound again. So it's almost like running a tube screamer into a Mesa or something like that. It gets you way more closer to like that nu metal sound. You know. Yeah, so again, if you want more flub taken out, you've got the depth control. Just dial that back. The depth control it works in the sort of negative feedback of the amp as well. So it will change the overall response again a little bit. But all that carving ability out of the amp before you've used the EQ or you've changed the mic positions or anything like that, I find really cool. It's a malleable amp. That was the word that we used in the website, like malleable, because you can really fine tweak it how you want in terms of a high gain amp. Like I say, I'm not really a super chuggy genty guy, so the fact that I can get this like fat, dirty sort of doom tone out of it for me is awesome, which I will demonstrate now. I'm not sure what doom band that is or what it sounds like, but to me that's pretty that's just disgustingly heavy. And again, the transpose works super well on this plugin. Really happy with that too. But yeah, I'm trying to, obviously we've been going quite a while, nearly an hour. Really trying to show you the kind of, it's a tone tweakers plugin as well. You can really just add little bits here and there. You laughing at?
Yes.
Why are you laughing?
Someone just said bad days to be a brick wall. It cracks me up.
Sorry. Anyway, yeah, so it's a really, particularly the high gain amp, you can really tweak it and like shape it around the style of high gain that you want to use, you know, and that's something that I was very excited about. And also, like, just to point out, I saw a few comments about the noise of this amplifier in particular. I would say that the real thing is it's not the quietest of amps, so it's accurate in that sense. One thing I would also point out is, let me just turn off the fuzz. That's the amount of noise it has. Like, if I'm just, the gate's not on, the gain's at halfway. It's also worth saying when you pull the tight knob back, it actually adds more gain. Just mute that. So to me, that's, I wouldn't necessarily call that a noisy, bad noisy amp. If anyone's experiencing that, I would say address your input signal, check out what the interface is using, might be the electrics in the house, all that kind of stuff. If my bedroom light's on downstairs, it gives me the worst ground hum ever. So it's worth pointing those things out. If you've got a power conditioner or anything like that, super handy. I also compared it against a couple of the other plugins as well, just to see, and for me personally, I didn't think it was anything too intense. So yeah, if you're finding that, try address some of those issues like input gain, all that kind of stuff. Like, you might find that helps. Okay, so that would be the amp. That would be the amps. I need to take you through the synth, really, to be honest, at this point. So I've been going a while. I'm going to grab the Strat. Let's load up a quick Strat preset. That one's fun. That preset's called Fuzz Exploder Strat. It comes with the plugin. Anyway, synth. So let's see how it's set up. Okay. So as I say, input sensitivity is really important, as is the gate, because they affect the amount of pops and glitches and all those kind of things that you might find as artifacts. Because at the end of the day, what the synth's looking for is a pitch to then trigger the ADSR. Like a guitar tuner. Imagine a guitar tuner, finds your pitch, then it triggers the ADSR, then it triggers the oscillators, then you hear the synth, right? That's how it works. I only know that because Pancho told me. But then, when you're doing this, like, that's gonna, it's basically the synth going, give me a note to trigger a sound. So what's important is, if you don't want that, you need to address the input sensitivity and the gate so that you can get rid of that. Basically, to give you a quick example. Anyway, let's start from, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna reset that. I'm gonna go back to it and we'll start here. So this is, let's dial in a synth tone. Want the mix on full. I'm going to leave the, in fact, I'm going to boost the input sensitivity. I want the envelope retrigger on, for me personally, because it's going to give me a new, it's going to trigger an envelope every time I hit the string. So that's good for me along the top. Next, my amplifier section, I like to put sustain on full. And for now, I'm going to keep the decay and the attack in the middle, so that it's like, it's neither going to cut out quick or fade in. It's just going to stay as I hit the string. Okay, so I've done that. The next thing I'm going to do is move to my unison section. So these are my oscillators. Currently, neither of them are turned on, so I turn them on. All that does is start to give us, as you can see, the detune's already turned up. I'm going to take that down. What you should notice between the two, sort of gets louder because we're sort of, it's unison, so we're doubling up that signal. There are currently 3. I like it on 5. Gives you the most beef sound. And then you detune it a bit, so you get, and turn the width up. So now you should hear it kind of doing this, which is really cool. Next up, we want to change the shape, the wave shape. I want to hear like a filthy low end, so I'm going to change that to square, octave below. Turn that down a bit. Whoops. So we've got that. That's cool. I'm going to change that to a ramp.
Just bear mind any guitar noise you can hear is coming from the mic and not the.
Oh, that's very true. Yeah, sorry, I didn't turn the mic off. I was getting carried away. I'm still dialing in a synth tone. So that's cool for me for now. Again, we can change the pitch of the oscillators. So it's like a power chord, but what I like to do is put one octave below and then one up there, so you kind of get a nice blend, and actually switch those around so you get. That's what I like. So I'm happy with the level of them. I like a little bit of detune. I'm happy with the width and the unisons and everything. So next, the filter. So as you'd expect, the filter works so it gets brighter. The high is a cutoff. So it's currently cutting everything off above 500 hertz. So I'll point this out now. You can map anything in this plugin to MIDI. So if you've got a Bluetooth, I use the Boss EV1 MIDI expression pedal. I can map the cutoff to my expression pedal. Use it. I could map the semitones. I could map any element of the plugin as you can with all the other ones. So that's really cool in a live application if you want to control some of that. Anyway, so that's the filter cutoff. Resonance. Very like, how would you say, what you'd expect to find in a synth. So basic synth in terms of the world of synths, but the fact that this is all being triggered by your guitar and you can control it is insane. It's genuinely like a first for them. So I think it's a first in that sort of realm of stuff, I think. Anyway, so that's cool. So want it about there. Let's dial in a little bit of reverb and delay just because we can. Okay, cool. So that's a cool synth sound for me. Real quick, I'll just demonstrate. I forgot to mute it. Whoops. Sorry, guys. So that's cool. And then we can... So let me go back to the amplifier section now, because we've got the sustain up. Now, what I'm going to do is turn on the arpeggiator. All we're going to have is one note, like this. This is a really good way of me demonstrating what this knob does. By keeping the arpeggiator on, it allows me not to have to focus on what I'm doing here, so I can show you what that does. Anything before noon acts as decay, so it actually affects how long the note is held. Anything above that, above noon, it's the other way around, so it ramps into the note. So let me turn that on again. So that is a really good way of showing you how that knob works. And again, I love that, particularly the arpeggiator just giving me a rhythm without doing any arpeggios. And then I can use that to basically create cool syncopated tight rhythms. And I used that in my launch track, actually. It was something like this. So, yeah, let me elaborate on the arpeggiator real quick. Again, you can click in and out different notes to do different things. So. And again, if you want to snap this to a scale, a chord scale, I'm tuned to E flat, I believe. So if I go root, D sharp, minor, we'll do root fifth, we'll do root, minor third, fifth octave. So. So now if I play up and down the minor scale, D sharp minor scale, it will give me the chord scale, it will follow me with the chord scale. It's really cool. And yes.
Oh, you're still muted.
Yes, you can do the thing. It's on trend right now, isn't it? I suppose. It's like, it's a sick series, to be fair. If you haven't seen it, absolutely watch it. But it would have been rude not to add that to the plugin with the synth, right? So the fact you can play that arpeggio with one string, one note, it's pretty sick. Shout out to Seba at Neural for creating that preset. So I did. That's basically how the synth works. I tried to be as detailed as possible, I suppose, without taking forever, because we've been an hour now. I do want to answer your questions. Obviously, this video is going to be kept online afterwards so that you can refer to it. I'll timestamp the relevant areas. But yeah, that's basically how the synth works. Something else to point out, which is really cool. If I load up one of my presets, let's do like the Cone Buster synth. This is in pre mode. It's running through the high gain amp. And yeah, basically it allows you to create these really cool sounds like this one.
Between the master volume and the presence knob.
The master volume and the presence knob?
Yeah.
What, on the amplifier?
On the amplifiers, yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's a really good idea. So, the relationship between the master volume and the presence knob, particularly on the high gain amp, as you turn the master volume up, the presence becomes less and less effective. As you turn the master volume down, the EQ and the presence become more effective. That's the general rule for any amplifier. You'll hear the EQ be way more effective the lower the master is. Because as you turn the master up, you get power amp saturation. So it's just opening up wider and wider and wider. And you don't get the intricacies of the sound quite as easily when dialing in using the EQ and the presence that way. So that's something to point out. But if you want like a lower... See, what's cool to say is that particularly like the default setting, I've boosted the master and I've lowered the gain, because like in a more traditional amp setting, if you lower the gain, you can gun the master and it gives you that bigger, wider open sound, you know. So case in point. I just love the fuzz. Okay, so I think that's everything in the plugin, I think. I mean, apart from the rooms, maybe. Let's have a look. One of my favorite presets that I made is Strat in a room vibing. This one. It's just like roomy, kind of chill vibe. So kind of like very touch responsive and just fun, and you get the feeling, particularly when you turn it up in the room, you can feel the amp sat in that space, and that's just really nice to play. And again, when you turn on the fuzz, and I really like that roomy fuzzy vibe. Like there's a video of Philip Sayce playing that, was it THR, that Yamaha amp thing, and he's like, and he just rips in this room, and you hear the amp in the room with the fuzz and everything about it, and that's something that, again, I love that sound, so I wanted to be able to achieve that in the plugin. So we've got fuzz mid push strat lead. Let's try that. I like that one too. Okay, I think at this point it's probably a good idea to answer some questions, unless there's anything that I've missed.
Guitar, do some playing maybe, and then we'll let people's questions come
Okay,
in.
good idea. Thank you for tuning in and bearing with me throughout this live stream, by the way. I appreciate it. Got the old Les Paul out because I figured we'd get some Tonally vibes. Why not? Whilst I'm tuning, it's a good opportunity to say thank you all so much for the kind words about the track that I wrote for the launch. It was really fun. It was actually a challenge. Dan was like, it can't be longer than about 3.5 minutes. And I was thinking, there's so much in the plugin to fit into the tune, and also I wanted to, show off the strat tones, the mid, the lead tones, the mid gain stuff, and the high gain stuff. So it was really a lot of fun, and it was a great challenge to do. So I'm really happy with the track, and yeah, it's going to be available. It's called We Are Here, and it's going to be available next Wednesday, I believe, on all streaming platforms. So if you want to save that onto your playlists, then please do. And it's also the first single, I guess you call it a single, from Grinding Gears 4, which is coming out later this year. It'll be a few months from now, probably. And it'll be the last one. And then I'm going to do a real album. So anyway, now we got Les Paul. Hi, Les. It lies. Les Paul is not in tune. anyone has problems tuning Les Pauls, let me know in the comments. The only problem with live streaming is this is the bit that I normally edit out of my videos, so you don't see this. So I'm sorry. Right. That'll do. Oh. That'll do. Are we back on? Yeah, we need to do like this. Like that. Style in some Tonally vibes. Carried away on that for far too long. There's too many avenues of vibe and jam that you can go down with it. Obviously, I'm biased because it's my plugin, and that's weird to say, but it feels great, and I could just get lost in this thing for so long, and I have done leading up until the relaunch of it. I was genuinely like so nervous when it was launching, because I was like, I really hope people get the vibe. So hopefully you do by the end of this stream. And if it's not for you, cool. If you prefer like tighter or whatever, or it's too much tweaking or whatever, then that's great. But for those of you who like the same kind of vibes as me, then I sincerely hope you enjoy this. All right.
You want some questions?
Let's have some questions.
Okay. So Jack asks,
I'm going to have a sip of beer.
Is the bass octave synth preset what you would normally use to double under your bass for Tosca or the Tokenist music?
Okay, so yeah, that question very quickly was the bass synth preset that I saved in the defaults, in the artist presets even, is that the same kind of bass synth sound that I would use to double up riffs? Yes, it is. And I also added another one called Crushed Bass Synth because I jumped between the two. And actually on that launch track, there isn't any bass guitar. All the launch track is it's all the bass synth that you're hearing. And I jumped between the Crushed Bass Synth preset and the Keyboard Bass Synth preset. And where is it? Yeah, the Bass Synth preset, which sounds like this. a quick example. So yeah, I would use that, and then that's a utility sound in the sense that from that, then I would add more compression to it, EQ it, get it to sit with the mix a bit better. But for me, that going in, that would be what I would use. And again, the beauty of plugins like this or any of the other neural plugins is when you record a part, it's a DI signal that you're editing afterwards. So if you've written a riff and it's taking you ages to get it down, which sometimes happens for me, and then I'm like, I really don't want to have to track that again, or I really don't want to have to learn that on keys. The beauty here is they can just copy and paste the DI track to a new channel, load up the synth, and it will just play the same bit. So it's doubled up already without any effort. So that's amazing. Workflow as well is cool. One other thing, just before we move on to another question, it reminds me, you can use the synth with a keyboard. Let me demonstrate that super quickly, just whilst we're here, because I think it's really important for you guys out there that do like to play keys that you can do this. So I'm just going to load up a quick track. Software instrument. No, I actually don't need to do that. I could just do, yeah, I'll do that. Load up any like utility synth. So, I don't know, vintage clav, we'll try that, see what happens. Okay. Bear with me 1 second. The beauty of live streams. Right. So let me get rid of that. Right. And then if I load up the plugin in front. So yeah, you can use it with a keyboard, which I think is sick. It's just really flexible like that, which means that it will read MIDI notation. So obviously that's a utility synth in Logic. So I'll record the MIDI notes in on piano roll, then it will get fed into the synth, and then you can do it that way if you wanted to. Anyway, next question.
Matchless asks, how would you go about creating the Tosca main high gain tone in the plugin?
How would I go about getting the main Tosca high gain? Okay. Whoops. Okay. I'll just dial it in real quick. Default. Go here. Well, to be perfectly honest, I mean that's pretty much how I set it in real life, because it doesn't have presence. Tighten up there. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna get rid of some of that. Something like this. Sorry, the mic's on. Sorry for the ringy strings. But yeah, basically that's how I would have it set. Obviously, I used to run 2 amps. I can actually demonstrate that for you right now. Second channel would be like this. Hard Panam. So we got 1 default gain. So it'll take me 2 seconds. That would literally be like running my stereo rig. That is literally what that would be. Having both set up in monitoring like that, hard pan them, one on the high gain, one on the crunch with the gain all the way up, and that is basically the Tosca tone. So yeah, that's how I'd go about it. Yes, next questions.
Next question is, someone wants you to recap on what the amps were modelled.
So to recap on the amps we modelled and based them on, so the crunch and the high gain amp were heavily inspired by my Lunchbox Krakens that I've used for years and years with Tosca and Totemist and anything that I've done original music. They're 50 watt heads, you know, kind of. So that's what you're getting here basically, but we adapted them. So we added things like those switches, the mid push and the high end push on the crunch amp, and we added a presence knob and a tight knob, which are completely reshape the sound of the amps. For the clean amp, we based it on like a Fender Twin and then added those switches again because that's what I like to use, that sort of sound with my Strats and things like that. And they're great in front with fuzzes and overdrives taken in front. So those are the amps it was kind of based on.
Nice. Can you recreate the main guitar tone from Don't Kick It?
Can I recreate the main guitar tone from Don't Kick It? Yes. It might take me a second. Also, the guitar in question is in dire need of some new strings. These are still the same ones that I had on from the video shoot. That's bad, isn't it? Okay. Oh yeah, I high panned it. Oh, listen to how dead that sounds. Oh, that's so harsh. Anyway. We'll do real quick. I'll do like. Oh, it's obviously turned up as well. It's in C sharp, so it'll be there. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Then I would have the octave on for the bit at the end. It's worth saying that with new strings it would probably sound a bit better. Not better, but you know, like nicer. But yeah, basically it's a combination. That particular track's a combination of fuzz, overdrive, and then I'm using the octave when necessary. My guitar is horribly out of tune. Okay.
Did you use any of the included presets in the launch video track?
I did. So in terms of the presets used in the launch video, one thing I will point out, which I'm a little bit sorry to say, is that the intro Strat tone wasn't included for some reason, which was slightly unfortunate, but we will be able to update that. So we will get that eventually. But Num Fade Bass Synth 1 was the opening synth sound that you heard. Fuzz Mid Push Strat Lead was the fuzz tone that you heard. Octalead was the lead from the verse. What else have I... There's another one in here. I think it's Wall of Tone was used for the heaviest, darkest section. Yeah. Oh, no, sorry. That's Nasty was used for the heaviest, darkest section. The Gates of Hell was the big break. Yeah, basically, there's a bunch in there that I used. So.
Okay. cabs matching the Krakens, or are they something else?
No, so the cabs are something else. Basically, the high gain is a oversized Massaad 412 with V30 speakers that Nolly personally sent over to Finland for Elmo and Matthias to capture at Finbox Studios, which is where we captured the cabs in the rooms. The Crunch cab is a green back speaker and a black back speaker that you can blend together. It's just a different sound. Like, you obviously can unlink them, and you can use the Crunch channel with the V30 cab as well if you want that kind of tone. But it's nice to have a bit of everything there. And then the clean cab is an open back 212, and we use 2 different speakers. I can't remember exactly the model of the speaker, but again, you have the option with the clean between all the different mics and speakers there. So it's you can really just dial in whatever you want. It's as much of a tone tweakers plugin as it is a place to create. And also I wanted to appeal as well to guys that like tones, like my friend Joe Gosney from Black Peaks and like Andy Gillen from Palm Reader, the guys from Press Tomiko, these kind of bands that like Andrew Groves from Arcane Roots, these bands that play heavy music, but it's not like heavy metal, like it's angry, heavy, intense guitar tones, but it's usually built up from like a fuzz and overdrive, like a telly, you know, like really wanted a plugin that did that kind of thing as much as the heavier, more modern stuff too.
Do you have a favorite preset?
A favorite preset? Yes. I love this preset. It's called Cleveland Steamer. I love that. It's just so dirty. Another one that I like is Buttery. Yeah, Buttery's fun. Buttery's just like nice. So that one's cool. But I would be honest, like some of my favorite ones are the synth ones because it's such new grounds. It's so much fun. One of my favorite ones was Hollow. Oh, Glitchy Riffs. Where is it? Glitched Riffs. This one's sick. Because I designed it so that it's blending. You can see there's a little bit of mix from the synth in there, mostly guitar. But when you play a riff and you do the scratchy stuff in between, it like glitches out like a bit like an old like fax machine or something. I like to get experimental with it. I mean, it's one of these that you can just combine weird stuff together and like just get the weirdest, coolest tones. Again, just to reference the Tim Henson plugin, the first thing that I realized when I tried the Archetype Tim Henson was this is his like workspace for him to create what he does. This is his production tool. He can create everything that he normally does within that plugin. I was hugely inspired by that. Rather than it being like an amp tone, some cabs and some pedals, it's like this is where I can come to create music. You know, I can just program drums with something like GGD or whatever, and then just use this, and that's basically that is what I used for the launch track. So, more questions?
I think we're good.
Let's have one more question.
All right, one more.
Because it's 10:30. I've been for an hour and a half. One more question. I've really enjoyed this.
Someone else do different audio interfaces matter with the tone of the plugin.
The different audio interfaces matter with the tone of the plugin. Yes, if you're using a lower end audio interface, you might find that it gives you a little bit more noise. Make sure you just check your input levels and stuff like that. I don't know. I use the Universal Audio Apollo interfaces. I know they're really high end, so that does help. But I would say check things like that. Check that you're not running dirty power. Check you're not getting power from a lot of different places, because that can all contribute to the overall tone.
Someone wants to know if they can play bass instead of guitar.
You can play bass instead of guitar through this. In fact, there's some bass presets in there from some of the artists, and I've seen people using bass with it. So yeah.
Can you get an Andy Timmons tone?
You can get an Andy Timmons tone. I mean, for me to dial one in real fast, let's try. I mean, it's definitely not this tone. Let's see if we can start somewhere and adapt it. Strat vibes, maybe? That's kind of already there. We just need a little bit more. We need dual delay. Come on, man. Where is it? Oh, there you go. There it is. I mean, I don't know if that's anywhere near enough. It feels a bit Timmonsy to me. If I spent a little more time on it, definitely. But you can do that. That'll probably wrap it up, I think. Firstly, thank you all for tuning in, checking it out. It'll stay online after this, and I'll do my best to timestamp it as best as possible to address all the different areas. I hope I covered and answered enough questions and cleared it up. Anything people were unsure about, or now you know about, like the vintage and modern switches loading up completely new pedals. The whole plugin is brand new algorithms in every sense. There's nothing's been reused from older plugins or anything like that. It's all brand new stuff. And yeah, check it out. I mean, check out, it's free trial, 14 days, whatever. For the price of a mid-range overdrive pedal, you get all this, which is pretty cool. But that's all I'm going to say. Don't want to flog my own stuff. Thank you for checking it out. Thank you to Neural DSP again. And I guess that's it. Love you all. Thank you to Dan for being an absolute legend.
Nice.
I've been Rabea, and I'll see you all very soon.
You play out?
Oh, yeah, I'll play out. Yeah. I was just going to press end. Right. Let's do that.